Daf Yomi Tractate Zevachim, page 91. Zevachim Tzadik Aleph, and starting from the Gemara on the bottom of Tzadik Yamid Beis. Just read the English just to get the context. A dilemma was raised before the sages. The Mishnayot in 89a taught that a frequent offering precedes other offerings, and also that an offering of greater sanctity precedes others. If there is a frequent offering and an offering of greater sanctity to be sacrificed, which of them precedes the other? Does the frequent offering take precedence due to the fact that it is frequent, or perhaps the offering of greater sanctity takes precedence as it is of greater sanctity? The Gemara suggests, come in here, the ruling of the first Mishnah in this chapter, that the daily offerings precede the additional offerings because they are frequent. Okay, and now we're on top of 91a with the words the Afal Gav. The Afal Gav, the Musafin Kadeshi, Atu Shabbos, the Musafin Anai, the Tamidin, Lo Ahanai. And even though the additional offerings are of greater sanctity, as they are sacrificed due to the sanctity of Shabbat, the frequent offering precedes the offering of greater sanctity. The Gemara rejects this proof. Is that to say that the sanctity of Shabbat affects the sanctity of the additional offerings, but does not affect the daily offerings brought on Shabbat? Rather, the sanctity of Shabbat elevates the sanctity of the daily offerings as well, as both are of equal sanctity. The frequent daily offering precedes the additional offerings. Tashima Musve Shabbos Koidmin Musve Osh Chodesh Atu Osh Chodesh Musaf Nidei Ahani Musve Shabbos Lahani. The Gemara cites another proof. Come in here, the continuation of this Mishnah. The additional Shabbat offerings precede the additional new moon offerings because they are more frequent, despite the fact that the new moon elevates the sanctity of its additional offerings. The Gemara rejects this proof in a similar manner. Is that to say that the sanctity of the new moon affects the sanctity of its additional offerings, but does not affect the additional offerings of Shabbat? These additional offerings are also imbued with the sanctity of the new moon. Tashima Musve Rosh Chodesh Koidmin Musve Rosh Hashanah Kol Gav de Rosh Hashanah Kedisha Atu Rosh Hashanah Musve Didei Ahani Musve Rosh Chodesh Lo Ahani. The Gemara cites another proof. Come in here, the continuation of this Mishnah. The additional new moon offerings precede the additional new year offerings because they are more frequent. Even though the new year is of greater sanctity, the Gemara rejects this proof as well. Is that to say that the sanctity of the new year affects the sanctity of its additional offerings, but does not affect the additional offerings of the new moon? Tashima Davachim Birkas Hayayin Tedira Ubirkas Hayayin Me'ena Tedira V'Tadir V'Shena Tadir Koidim Afal Gav De Birkas Hayom Kedisha Atu Shabbos De Birkas Hayom Ahanai De Birkas Hayayin Ahanai. The Gemara cites another proof. Come in here, a Braita, Tosefta Brachot 525, that discusses the dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel with regard to the order of blessings in Kiddush. After stating one reason for the opinion of Beit Hillel, that one recites the blessing on the wine before the blessing of the sanctity of the day, the Tosefta adds, alternatively, Beit Hillel say the blessing over wine is recited frequently, and the blessing over the day is not recited as frequently. And there is a principle. When a frequent practice and an infrequent practice clash, the frequent practice takes precedence over the infrequent practice. This applies even though the blessing of the day is of greater sanctity, as it is recited due to the sanctity of Shabbat. The Gemara rejects this proof as well. Is that to say that the sanctity of Shabbat affects the sanctity of the blessing of the day, but does not affect the sanctity of the blessing on the wine? Tashema, Diyam Rabbi Yochanan halacha, Mispalil alam shel mincha, V'achar kach shel musafin, Atu shavas tfilas musafin hanai, Tfilas mincha lo hanai. The Gemara cites another proof. Come in here. As Rabbi Yochanan says, if one did not recite the additional prayer on Shabbat until the time of the afternoon prayer arrived, the halacha is that a person prays the afternoon prayer and afterward the additional prayer, as the afternoon prayer is more frequent. This ruling applies despite the fact that the additional prayer is of greater sanctity. Once again, the Gemara rejects the proof. Is that to say that the sanctity of Shabbat affects the sanctity of the additional prayer, but does not affect the sanctity of the afternoon prayer? Tashema shlamim shel emesh chatas v'asham shel yom shlamim shel emesh koidmin ha'idi v'idi diyom chatas v'asham kadmi v'afal gav d'shlamim tediri. The Gemara cites yet another proof. Coming here in the Mishnah, if one has a peace offering from yesterday and a sin offering or a guilt offering from today, the peace offering from yesterday precedes the others. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. One can infer from this that if both this offering and that offering are from today, the sin offering or guilt offering takes precedence. And this is the halacha, even though the peace offering is more frequent. As people sacrifice voluntary peace offerings more often than sin offerings or guilt offerings. Amar Rave, Matsui ka'amart, Tadir kamibayalan, Matsui la kamibayalan. Rava said in response, are you speaking of a common offering? Although peace offerings are sacrificed more often than sin offerings, there is no obligation to sacrifice them at any particular frequency. We raise the dilemma only with regard to a clash between a frequent offering and one of greater sanctity, but we do not raise the dilemma regard to a common offering. Rabbi Rav Huna Bar Yehuda said to Rava, is that to say that a common obligation is not considered tantamount to a frequent obligation? But isn't it taught in the Braita with regard to positive mitzvot, whose intentional neglect results in the punishment of karet, but whose unwitting transgression does not entail the sacrifice of a sin offering? I should exclude the neglect of the paschal offering from the obligation to sacrifice a sin offering, as it is not frequent, and I should not exclude the neglect of the mitzvah of circumcision, as it is frequent. Circumcision is considered a frequent mitzvah, as it is performed more often than the paschal offering, despite the fact that there is no obligation to perform circumcisions at any particular frequency. My tadira b'mitzvahs. V'hi b'yasema mila legabe pesach ki tadira damya. Rava answers, what is the meaning of frequent in that context? It means that circumcision is frequent in terms of the numerous mitzvot commanded with regard to its fulfillment. And if you wish, say instead that circumcision in relation to the paschal offering is considered like a frequent obligation, as it occurs far more often, whereas peace offerings are brought only somewhat more often than sin offerings. In sum, one cannot infer from the Mishnah that an offering of greater sanctity precedes a frequent offering. Ukedim ushchad l'shina tadir mai miyamrinan kev l'shachtem makrev le'oidilma yahev le'achadim mimares v'damo ad dimakrev le'tadir v'hadal makrev l'shina tadir. An additional dilemma with regard to precedence was raised before the sages. If the priest had two offerings to sacrifice, a frequent offering and an infrequent offering, and although he should have initially sacrificed the frequent offering, he slaughtered the infrequent offering, what is the halacha? Do we say that since he already slaughtered the infrequent offering, he also proceeds to sacrifice it, or perhaps he does not yet sacrifice it but gives it to another priest who stirs its blood to prevent it from congealing until he sacrifices the frequent offering, and then he sacrifices the infrequent offering. Amar Rav Huna misura tashima shlomim shel emesh chatas v'asham shel yoin shel emesh koidim shel yoin hadi yoin dumya de emesh. Rav Huna from Surah said, come and hear an answer from the Mishnah. If one has a peace offering from yesterday and a sin offering or a guilt offering from today, the peace offering from yesterday precedes the sin offering from today. It can be assumed that the Mishnah is not discussing a case where none of the offerings have been slaughtered, as the peace offering would not take precedence in this situation. Rather, it is discussing a peace offering from yesterday that was slaughtered, but its blood has not yet been presented. One can infer from this that only a peace offering from yesterday takes precedence in this situation, but in the case of a peace offering from today that is similar in other aspects to a peace offering from yesterday, the peace offering does not take precedence. The Gemara explains, and what are the circumstances of this case? This is a situation where one first slaughtered the peace offering from today. In this case, the sin offering or guilt offering takes precedence, although the peace offering is already slaughtered, as both of them are of greater sanctity. The same should apply to an infrequent offering that was slaughtered before a frequent offering. The frequent offering is slaughtered before the blood of the infrequent offering is presented. Dilma shlamim de'emesh chalachaz l'asham diyom hechimesh kachas la deshachtinu letarvaihu avalo shachtinu letarvaihu tibayelach. The Gemara rejects this answer. Perhaps when the Mishnah makes reference to a peace offering from yesterday and a sin offering or a guilt offering from today, the circumstances should be understood differently. How can you find these other circumstances? The Mishnah discusses a case where the priest already slaughtered both of them, the peace offering and the sin or guilt offering, and the blood of both awaits presentation on the altar. But had he not yet slaughtered both of them, but only the peace offering, you can still raise the dilemma of whether the priest should set aside the blood of the peace offering in order to slaughter the sin offering first, due to its greater sanctity. Tashima Davacher Birchas Yain Tadira Birchas Yain Tadira Bitadim Shinatadia Tazikoidim. The Gemara sets another proof. Come and hear the aforementioned Braita. Alternatively, Beit Hillel say, with regard to the order of blessings in Kiddush, the blessing on wine is recited frequently, and the blessing of the day is not recited frequently, and there's a principle: when a frequent practice and an infrequent practice clash, the frequent practice takes precedence over the infrequent practice. The obligation to recite the blessing of the day is due to the sanctity of Shabbat and applies at the start of Shabbat before wine is placed on the table. Nevertheless, the blessing on the wine takes precedence due to its frequency. So too, the slaughtering of the frequent offering should take precedence even if the priest had already commenced the sacrificial rites of the infrequent offering. Hachanami, 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 die, 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 die. Hachanami, to give in the Asyan or the Asayayan. Come on, Nishchiti, not dummy. The Gemara rejects this proof. Here too, with regard to Kiddush, the circumstances are different since wine is available when one recites Kiddush, and therefore the obligation of both blessings come together. This means that it is comparable to a situation where one already slaughtered both animals. Tashima, come in here, so. I think it's a brisa. Is it? Not sure. Tashima, Damar Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Mispalen, Adam Shemin Chavi, Achar Kach Shum Musafim, Achanami, Kevan Nemati Zvan Tiviras Mincha, Keman Shchiti Dami. The Gemara cites yet another proof coming here, as Rabbi Yochanan says. The halacha is that a person prays the afternoon prayer and afterward the additional prayer, despite the fact that the obligation of the additional prayer applies first, which is similar to an offering slaughtered first. The Gemara rejects this proof here too, since the time of the afternoon prayer has now arrived. One is obligated in both prayers, and again, this is comparable to a situation where one already slaughtered both animals. שחטו קודם חצות פסול מפני שנאמר בו בין ארבעים קודם לתמיד כושר ויהי ממרס בדמו עד שיזרוק אדם. Rav Acha, son of Ashi, said to Ravina that an answer to this dilemma can be found in a Mishnah, Psachim 16:1a. If one slaughtered the Paschal offering before midday, it is disqualified because it is stated in its regard in the afternoon. Exodus 12, verse 6. If he slaughtered it before the daily afternoon offering was slaughtered, it is valid, even though the daily offering should be sacrificed first. But because someone should stir its blood to prevent it from congealing until he slaughters and sprinkles the blood of the daily offering. But someone should stir its blood to prevent it from congealing until he slaughters and sprinkles the blood of the daily offering. Although the infrequent Paschal offering is already slaughtered, the priest first slaughters the frequent daily offering and then sprinkles the blood of the Paschal offering. The Gemara rejects this proof as well. Here we are dealing with a case where he gave precedence to the daily offering and slaughtered it first, and then offered the Paschal offering before sprinkling the blood of the daily offering. Since the blood of both offerings requires sprinkling on the altar, the blood of the daily offering takes precedence. Rav Acha, the elder, said to Rav Ashi that the wording of the Mishnah is also precise, as it teaches until the blood of the daily offering is sprinkled, and it does not teach until he slaughters and sprinkles the blood. This indicates that the daily afternoon offering has already been slaughtered. The Gemara conclude from its wording that this is the meaning of the Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches, and with regard to all of the offerings that are eaten, the priests are permitted to alter the manner of their consumption and eat them as they choose. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for this halakha? The Gemara answers, the verse states, with regard to the gifts of the priests of all the consecrated items of the children of Israel, to you have I given them, it means limosha. Numbers 18:8. Targum Onkelos renders this term as for greatness, indicating the flesh of offerings should be eaten in a manner that kings eat their food, meaning prepared in any way they want. That is the Gemara, and now we go on to a new Mishnah. Amar b'Shimon, im reis hashemen shehu mitchalek be'azare, ein tzarich lishon mahu. Ela mutar rekike menachos Yisrael, or ela motar rekike menachos Yisrael belag shemen shemetzoyre. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon said, if you saw oil that is being distributed in the temple courtyard for consumption by the priests, and you seek to ascertain its nature, you do not need to ask what it is. Rather, it is left over from the oil of the wafers of the meal offerings of the Israelites, after they smeared a bit of oil on them, or it is left over from the log of oil of the leper after a small amount of the oil was placed on him. In Maris Hashem Shu Nitan al Gabe Ishim Ein Tzarich Lishoel Mahu Ela Moita Rekik Minchas Kohanim Uminchas Kol Mashiach She'en Mitnavin Shemen Rabbi Tarfon Omer Mitnavin Shemen. If you saw oil that is placed on the flames of the altar in the manner of an offering, you do not need to ask what it is. Rather, it is left over from the oil of the wafers of the meal offering of priests, or it is the leftover oil from the meal offering of the anointed priest, which requires a great deal of oil and which is burned in its entirety on the altar. The Mishnah adds, one cannot say that the oil distributed to priests or burned on the altar was brought as a gift offering, as one may not contribute oil as a gift offering. Rabbi Tarfon says one may contribute oil as a gift offering. This concludes page 91a, and I think we'll stop here for now.